Kion. Welcome all and greetings. My name is Milly Jackdaw, and I've heard it tell that the difference between history and mythology is that mythology is true. So this presentation will be a mixture of mythology and also personal story, and you can decide for yourself what is true.
That's really rude.
Once upon a long, long time ago, the earth was already very old. Civilizations had risen and fallen to dust as all things must. And wild sow had the whole world at her feet, and at the tip of her wondrous nose, she nuzzled through the undergrowth. Can you see her? Clearing pathways, foraging for whatever was chewable. And she was followed. Predators, browsers, hunters, all followed Sal's paths across the land, finding springs, food, and each other. And where those pathways converged, clearings appeared. That's where the people gathered. That's where the eagle circled. Vortexes formed. The people came at peak moments in the yearly cycle, building their mounds, entering into those mounds at key transitional moments: death, initiation, birth, conception, death, initiation, birth, conception, marwolai, kechwiniad, genedigai, bechiodiad, marwolai, kechwiniad, genedigai, bechiodiad. Bechiodiad, conception. We begin in the east. Durine, Clydine, London, 1992. I'm on a dance floor. It's incredible. The atmosphere, the lights, the colours, the faces, the hands, the hips, the feet, the smiles, the hearts, and most of all, the music. Music that I've never heard before, music that my body just knows how to dance to when I let go and allow it. I make shapes I've never made before, and with these shapes come new feelings, inspirations, revelations. Everyone around me is doing this too. We are one great, joyful explosion of humans. And among us is one particular human. To me, he is a wizard. The spell is cast. The enchantment lasts for 3 years, at the end of which time I find myself with a miraculous wonder child. A fatherless boy, as it turns out, the wizard having magically vanished back into the wild otherworld from which he came. Mochyn Myrddin, Calon Mai, the centre of Britain, May Eve, long, long ago. Within the earth, 2 little piglets stirred, snuffling hungaroos, tendrils of mycelium lit up around their tender forms, and their mother's whispers roused them. Wake up, my glorious one. as they grew, they lit up like two electric strands on a double helix spiral, growing to their full selves, their dragons. And as the dragons woke and rose at dawn, the people gathered, dancing around blazing fires, within rings of stones, upon the hilltops, around the carved figures of horses in the landscape. They gave offerings, encouraged the dragons with all manner of wild frolics and fornications. This is how it had been for forever and a day, until this day. Story beginning day. The day things changed. This day, the dragons woke and rose at dawn, but their song was a scream, their violence extreme, as they slashed with their talons and ripped with their fangs, their pain piercing stakes throughout the land. From the east to the west, the south to the north, the unstoppable blast of sound poured forth. Leaves withered, birds fell from the sky. People lost their minds, some even died. Rivers and lakes stagnated, and the hawthorn blossoms were swept from the trees by the sour winds. No corn ripened, nor barley, nor wheat, nor fruits on the trees, nor babies conceived, no lambs carved, chicks, or even frogs born. Things died and remained unborn. Now, at that time, Britain was ruled by King Cleve, a fair and honest king. And the people petitioned him most earnestly to take measures to remedy this terrible plague that afflicted land and lives. And King Cleve, under advice from his wiser brother, Llefelys, the following May Eve, made his way to what he had calculated was the very centre of Britain, which we are told is near Oxford. Story tells us that. He took with him a vat of sweet mead, 2 stone jars, and a brocaded cloth. He sank the vat into the ground, there at the very epicentre of Britain, covered it with the cloth, put beeswax in his ears to guard against the screaming, and waited, hiding in a bush. Eventually he could feel the vibrations coming through the ground, and he knew that the scream had begun again, and when he looked, he saw 2 dragons, one red, the other white, rising up from the ground. They began fighting and spiraling around one another, flashes of fiery breath and bright talons, spiraling around and around until at last their power waned, and they became 2 oxen charging through the ether, clashing horns. See now, they take on once more their piglet forms and come spiraling down, 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 through the cloth, into the vat of sweet mead, and there they supped and slurped and guzzled, gulped, drank down all the mead, finally falling into a deep, contented oblivion. Cleve took his opportunity then. He stowed each one of those little dragon piglets into the stone jars, sealing them shut, and carting them from one place of profound power to another in the west, Gorllewin. Wales. Once in Wales, he made his way northward to what he had been told was the strongest place in the land, Mancryfa and Adeanas. When he reached it, he found a beautiful belly-shaped hill, surrounded on all sides by guardian mountains. And at the top of that hill he found a pool that glimmered in the moonlight, looking like a great eye observing the sky. And into this pool he cast the stone jars. They sank to the bottom. The land shifted and closed up over the pool, sealing those jars into the belly of the hill, where they remained gestating for a long time. Clydine, London, 1996. My son is a year old. My mum comes, tells me I must take a day off, have a day somewhere on my own. I gratefully accept. I have heard of a place called Uffington, where there is a Neolithic figure carved into the chalky hillside, and it is to this place that I am drawn on my precious day to myself. When I reach it, I find a place of great beauty and ancient power. Views stretching for miles in all directions. It's a fine day. What a place to gain perspective. I walk and weep, and walk and weep. And eventually, I become calm, and I find myself sitting. You're not allowed to do this anymore. Sitting in the eye of the horse figure on the landscape. Some say it's a horse, others perhaps a dragon. I can feel the healing energy flowing through me. And then I become aware of a presence somewhere in my consciousness. The presence of Merlin. I haven't called him. I haven't expected him, but he's there. I haven't even thought about him, perhaps not since I was holidaying with my family as a youth in Cornwall, finding his cave. He's there, with me, in the eye of the horse, and he's speaking to me. Would you like to know what he said? I don't remember much of what he said, but one thing stayed with me, and it's this. You cannot hope to comprehend the meaning of your own story from the limited perspective of the conditioned mind. Know this. Your story is part of a much bigger story, and it is a wondrous one. It was what you might call a moment of truth, a moment of awakening to the mythic quest of life, a moment that set me on a path to fulfilling my dream of becoming an actor and working with children and nature and wonderful things. A path which led me to discover storytelling and eventually to leave London with my son and relocate in Wales. What we found there blew our minds. The landscape, the ocean, the culture, the people, the music, stories. My son took the school bus every day from our little chapel up in the hills through the majestic Rydal Valley, quite different to his London train journey. And whilst on that bus, his eyes met those of a beautiful girl, a flower of destiny, as it turns out. More of that later. As for me, I walked the land, I learned the stories. I was deeply drawn to those ancient tales and the places in the landscape that tell those stories. deeply drawn to discovering more about many things, but especially Merlin. Dear Merlin, how do we find you? If not in the gall-marked pages of scribes and scholars, in the visions of artists and seers, perhaps in the stillness of grandfathers and grandmothers, perhaps in the coordinates of stones. Upon the spine, the tree of the world, you balance, poised, like a far-seeing hawk, wings raised, an elemental nexus. Following now, paths drawn by elemental dragons, you whisper secrets to the roots of thorn trees who sing them to the cloud-shaping silks. You bellow, leaping like a 7-tined stag, a shaman shout that breaks you out of the collective amnesia. Some say you are mad, like Sweeney in another tree, sprouting feathers, fur and claws, spouting incomprehensible stanzas. But is it madness to see so clearly more of the great all that is? This wisdom, encoded in stories, is passed from stone to drum to lung to tongue. Tales of Myrddin, wise and wild, conversing with creatures of one world or the other. Tales of Hen Wen, great sow mother, birthing and rebirthing sister and brother. Goiden mine I see ni Kodjan in night. Though then thou and tears in your knee, Governor high. A chilly now appear like white, who is trial? Oh, that's an ein yes, jag blir du via kampen, sitter hopan. In inga like we're my and hang another friend. Men yes, jag blir du via kampen, sitter hopan. In inga like roedd hi'n lled newydd ac yn gawys llawn, ond am fflamau yn y tanni. It was dark but for a new moon, and the princess was dancing barefoot on the wet grass. Around her chanting priestesses and standing stones. She danced and danced until time and reason loosened their hold, and she was filled with her own radiance. And then, out of the darkness, a glowing golden figure emerged. They stood palm to palm, eye to eye, heart to heart. Their light intensified. It was as if they were becoming one. A single startlingly bright star shot across the sky, and the wind swept sparks from the fire all around. The chanting reached its center. time to come, it became apparent that the princess was with child, and she was taken to the priory in the place now known as KingArthur or KingArthur to be cared for by the nuns. They would be her midwives. They asked her about the child's father. She told them about the glowing golden man. They told her she had been visited by an incubus. She birthed a miraculous wonder child, one who was destined to re-enchant the land and stir the memories of the people, one in whom the dragon energy still flowed. She called him Ambrosius. And Ambrosius was a most unusual boy. But the time came when Ambrosius could no longer remain in the protective circle of the nuns. He was called upon to give a service to the king, King Vortigern, a usurper king who had secretly had his predecessor, King Constantine, assassinated, who had invited in the Saxons to act as his mercenaries, but his plan had backfired. They had turned against him, and now he was on the run, fleeing for his life, seeking to build a fortress of safety, seeking to build it in the strongest place in the land, Mancruva and Odenus, that belly-shaped hill. But each day that his masons returned to continue the work of the previous day, they found the stones scattered upon the ground. Ambrosius was destined to offer the ultimate offering, his life. He was to be sacrificed, his blood sprinkled onto the ground to appease the spirits of that place and allow the tower to be built. But Ambrosius, though young, was canny and bold, and he leapt up confidently onto a rocky crag and spoke to Vortigern. He said, "Do your wise men know what is below the earth here? I know. Tell your men to dig down. They will discover a pool. When they drain the pool, there will be 2 dragons. They have been disturbed. Until you release them, you will not build here." And Vortigern, curious, impressed, and determined to build his tower, did just that. His men dug. They found the pool. They drained it. There, 2 stone jars. They were wobbling. And then they cracked open like 2 great eggs. Out of each of them came a dragon, one red, the other white, stretching their leathery wings, drying them in the breeze, rising and growing to their full size. Then they set upon one another once more, spiraling around and around, flashes of fiery breath and bright talons, beating the wings in an awesome display before flying away northwards over the mountains with echoing cries. And that is when Ambrosius made his first prophecy. Bless you. It was a prophecy of the rising up of the people of the land, the people of Britain, the bearers of tradition. It was a prophecy of the coming of Arthur, the time of peace. It was a time of the restoration of the goddess, the return of the healing maiden, her footsteps bursting into flame. A time of the awakening of humanity. And when he had spoken this prophecy, Ambrosius fell to the ground weeping, and at that moment he became Myrddin, one of the 3 skillful bards of the island of Britain, according to the Welsh triads, the other 2 being Taliesin, himself at one time known as Merlin, and Myrddin ap Morfran, he of the Selgovae tribe, the men of the north, Igoglef. Myrddin remained in that place for a long time, and it soon became known as Dinas Emrys, the city of the immortal one. But what of those dragons? Well, they were last seen heading northwards, perhaps following in the trail of the Druids. But wait, weren't the Druids wiped out by the Romans? Well, that is what the Romans would have us believe. Of course, there was a massacre and many were killed, but the Romans were canny. They knew what was coming, and they sent some away with their secrets and their mysteries westward to Ireland, and others northward to what is now Scotland. Some settling in the remote Western Isles, and others just beyond the wall, it marking the northernmost extent of the Roman administration. So let's follow them, those dragons and druids, and take a peek over the wall. From the Solway to the River Forth was the territory of the Gwir Gogledd, the men of the north. 13 kings who refused to fall under Roman authority, reigning in glory, fighting the Picts, the Angles, and each other. The fame of their deeds, the splendor of their courts, and the profusion of their generosity would be praised in song by the greatest of poets. At that time, the land was covered in a thick, impenetrable forest, inhabited by animals and birds of all kinds. Carew, Dave, Blythe, Clwynog, Avanc, deer, boar, wolf, fox, beaver, with the domains of the 13 kings spread along its fringes. And the people understood the need to feed the wild heart of nature. They gave praises and made offerings to the great mother goddess who births all life and receives the dead. And presiding over this vital relationship between humans and nature and supernature were the shaman priests and priestesses, the men and women of knowledge and power. They were the healers, the midwives, the shapeshifters, seers, poets, prophets, geomancers, astronomers, lawmakers, storytellers. And chief among them, Merlin ap Morgan, who was all these things and a highly skilled warrior to boot. Picture him now, Merlin ap Morgan, a man of rugged intensity, piercing, intelligent eyes, dressed in deerskin, a gold torque around his neck, sign of his nobility, an ash staff coiled in copper on one hand, and a wild wolf at his side, companion to him wherever he went. Picture them now, Myrddin and Wolf, making their way swiftly, purposefully, across the rugged terrain towards the court of King Gwenddolai, the last of the pagan kings. At their approach, the gates opened for them, and a great profusion met their senses. The sounds of bellowing cattle and squealing pigs, youths shouting as they practiced their warrior skills, the sound of hammer on anvil, butchering, bartering, bantering, wood chopping, tethered dogs snapped and snarled as Myrddin and Wolf passed by, swiftly silenced by a motion of Myrddin's staff. Within Gwenddolai's hall, a heat of feasting was in progress. Men sat on low couches covered with furs, taking full advantage of the hospitality of their host, for the upholding of their pledges of loyalty to him were dependent on it. Great platters piled high with meat, pitchers of mead and wine and ale, King Gwenddolai, at the head of the table, sitting, listening intently to the boasting and claims to lineage of the men, an expected ritual. For the greater were their merits, the greater were his and those of his tribe. A little behind him, on either side, were 2 wooden posts, on each of which sat a vulture. They flapped and screeched as Myrddin entered. Ah, Myrddin, friendanue. Gwelwyd dy bresenoldeb, wyt ti'n dod gyda chaneuon neu gyda newyddion? Come with songs or stories. Gyda newyddion a glywyd, ac o mat mwy cyfriblus, with news lord and of the most troubling kind. King Ryddoch has attacked Caerlaverock. The room was roused. Men shouted and exclaimed, getting to their feet, some reaching for weapons that hung glinting from the walls. Amenawad! Betham Amenawad! The men all wanted to know how far the attack had progressed. Were their women, their priestesses, safe? Cofiwch, ffrindiau. Merlin spoke with calm authority. Mae gan fenywod Caerlaverock, gwerau cryf, sgiliau y filwr. They are canny too, and have outwitted Ryddoch and his men for now. His warband have retreated. And we'll feel the full wrath of our revenge, one warrior shouted, the others all cheering their approval. They had all, at some time, gained initiation from the larks of Caerlaverock, and their children had been conceived and birthed by virtue of their rituals and their skills. King Gwenddolai spoke, calling them to order. King Ryddoch has finally shown his true colours, and I am quite sure is intent on conquering our territories. But this attack is clearly meant as a provocation. We must not play into his hands. However, Gwenddolai knew there was only really one course of action. There would be war. Innocent Llŷ, Cardsey Island, Wales. Summer 2023. I am on the mountain. The sun is newly risen, hazy through fine clouds, kissing the rippling ocean, making a pathway of gold on an expanse of silver grey, pastel blue. The layered shapes of mountains part the sea and the sky on the distant mainland. Pipits and wheatears trill over the golden gorse. Down below, the seals howl mournfully. I sit, leaning my back against a rocky crag, just watching the day unfold for maybe a couple of hours, watching the birds. And I suddenly see one bird that catches my attention, particularly a small brown bird of prey. She swoops down and lands upon the rocky crag against which I lean, just a couple of meters away from me. Her golden eyes meet mine. I get a really good look at this beautiful being before she takes flight once more. She is a female Merlin. Battle of Arderith is brutal, bloody, and long. Tribal war bands, 300 men apiece, muster against Fridach. Myrddin, at the side of the battlefield, encouraging and supporting the men with words of power, songs of victory. He musters the druid mist to confuse the enemy. And finally, leaps into the fray to fight alongside the men. The swirling staff, sparks fly. But it is all to no avail. King Gwendolai is slain. The men carry on fighting for weeks. Thousands die. Only when it is clear the battle is lost does Myrddin flee the battlefield. For whilst he lives, there is hope. He heads northward, he and Wolf, along Eskdale, along the river, to the Girdle Stones, and there he makes offerings to the river spirits before heading along an avenue of stones to another circle, the Looping Stones. There he weeps and makes prayers for the slain. Then he and Wolf head northwards along the Annan River into the forest of Keladon, and diverting up a small cascading burn, make their way through a wooded glen of ash, and oak, and rowan, birch. The piercing cry of a buzzard heralds their arrival at the place, where a deep ravine opens up in the rocky hillside, an ominous dark gash, looking for all the world like the jaws of a black and red dragon. And cutting through the steep-sided jagged scree, a bright stream ran, like a flickering tongue. And Myrddin and Wolf make their way up it, all the way to the place where huge granite boulders are overhanging, forming small caves. Shelter enough from the worst of the weather. They drink deep draughts from the chalybeate spring, coming from deep within the earth, bringing with it mineral-rich waters, crystal clear, and Myrddin douses himself, trying to wash away the gore and the grime of battle. He cannot clear the images from his mind. This place will be a refuge to them in the months and years to come. But for now they must go further. Ridder will surely send men and dogs after them. And so they continue on, climbing and leaping up a waterfall, all the way to the top of Hart Fell. This is the nodal point in the Selgovi territory. Selgovi, by the way, means the hunters. Perhaps these are the wolf people. Here is a place where 3 rivers run, the Clyde, the Tweed, and the Annan. Here is a place where a particularly distinguished apple tree grows. This tree is a magical tree. This tree is a way in to the other world. And Myrddin climbs, feeling himself shifting through, perching on the edge of one world and another. Wolf takes cover too. Senses keen, listening for the sound of dogs, listening to the trees, their thousands of allies sensing with them. Eventually, the need for rest overtakes them. But sleep is no comfort to Myrddin. His dreams are filled with the images of what he has seen, the lifeless faces of his friends and brothers, his king. He can still hear their cries. And he has other visions too. nightmare, dystopian visions of thousands of trees being felled. This forest of Kelethon, diminished, reduced to a mere fragment, and all the life within it diminished, the animals hunted, the birds killed. Some of the animals, like the wolf, the boar, the lynx, the wildcat, the avant, the boar, beaver, completely exterminate every Suddenly, Myrddin is awake. Someone is approaching. A wild sow, probably attracted by the magical apples. These apples are delicious. I've never tasted such good apples. They're making me feel a bit funny. Oh, I feel all sort of soft and sleepy. The tree is all shimmering. Oh, is there something there? Perhaps if I... Oh, yes. A man in the tree. What are you doing there? I'm hiding. Oh. Why? It's a very long story. Oh. I like stories. And so that is how Myrddin acquired a new companion, a wild, story-loving sow. What could be better? He told her many stories. Her favorite was this one, the tale of Hen Wen. And for this story, we will go southwards. Day. Long, long ago, there was a magnificent pig. She was tended by one of the 3 great swineherds in the island of Britain, whose name was Cole, as in hazel, and therefore a wise one. They lived in Cornwall, and she was magnificent. She was white as a summer cloud in her maidenly glory. She was full-bodied as the moon, a mother-to-be, no less. And though maidenly and motherly, also very old was she, and therefore was called Hen Wen, old white. Cole tended to her with great care and attention, and regularly took her to the oak woods to feed upon the acorns. And on one such occasion, Hen Wen took her opportunity. She turned and trotted away down the path. Cole instantly set off after her, but had great difficulty catching up with her, for though broad-bellied and short-legged, she was a very fast runner, and she did not dally even when she got to the coast. She did not slacken her pace, she just dove straight into the ocean, for Hen Wen, like all pigs, was an excellent swimmer. Cole, after brief hesitation, dove in after her, and they swam and swam through the water. Cole, eventually tiring, reaching out and grasping hold of Hen Wen's bristles, she powered on, unhindered. And eventually they came ashore in Wales, in Gwent. Cole was panting from exhaustion. Hen Wen was panting because she had gone into labour, she gave birth to a wheat grain and a bee. And henceforth, Gwent has been one of the best places for harvesting wheat and cultivating honey. But this was only the beginning. Henwen continued on, running down into Dyfed in the south of Wales, followed, of course, by Cole, staggering behind her, exhausted. There she gave birth once more to a barley grain and another bee, the region becoming famous for its barley bread and its delicious mead. Now we come full circle, for Henwen is in the territory of those ancient sows that carved the first paths across the Preseli hills, where those standing stones and those ancient mounds are located, those sacred sites. And I like to imagine that Henwen at last took a little rest in one of those mounds. And if she did, it must surely have been the one called KingArthur, the chamber of the sow. There is such a one at the base of Boyle Dragan in the Preseli hills. Finally, Cole caught up with her and they continued on running northwards, past my hometown of Aberystwyth, Mahuncliffe, Cader Idris, place of initiation for the ancient bards, and further up into the mountains, eventually coming to a craggy high hill very close to another hill that we have also visited on this journey, Dinas Emrys. Dinas Emrys, where those little piglets became dragons and rose up from the land. Now a sow is giving birth just a few hundred meters away, once more, this time to a wolf cub and an eagle chick, thus preserving the wild. For while she gave us cultivation, she gave us grains and honey, we must also surely have place for the wild creatures. But even then, she was not done. She continued northwards into Anglesey, Ynys-Môn, all the way to the north coast of Ynys-Môn, where she gave birth again, this time to a kitten of great size and ferocity, huge eyes that came to be known as one of the three great oppressors of the island of Mon. Now the story doesn't tell us what happened to Henwen next, but she was a very good swimmer, so perhaps she dove back into the ocean and continued swimming, and swam all the way along the west coast of Britain, up coming ashore at the Solway, visiting those priestesses, perhaps making her way along the Annan River into the forest of Celadon, up to Hart Fell, finally taking a rest beneath a particularly magical apple tree. Our sow, Mochyn Myrddin, Merlin's pig, liked to think so. Mochyn Myrddin, Merlin's pig, had eaten a lot of those magical apples. And she was beginning to change. She was beginning to grow. She was beginning to shift. Wings sprouted from her shoulders. She rose up into the air. Let's follow her and take a flying pig's eye view of Hart Fell. We see Myrddin and his sister Gwyndif standing side by side near the waterfall. We see two glowing lines of energy running through that place. The Belinus and Ellen lines making the spine of Albion. She follows these lines southwards. Until she reaches the place But there are 2 more lines coming from west to east. These are the Michael and Mary lines. And in the place where those 4 lines intersect, if we look down, we will see a Neolithic carved figure on a chalky hillside. And I am sitting in the eye of that Neolithic figure. Beside me, Myrddin. He's speaking to me. He seems to become aware of us, watching him from above. He looks up and smiles. Now there is an epilogue to this tale. Remember my son meeting that girl on the bus on his way to school? Well, 18 years later, he and she are together, have been together for 10 years now, and they have a child of their own, a miraculous wonder granddaughter. And she was born in 2024, the year of the dragon. So, thank you for listening. Ja, kom maar. By the way, I was born in the year of the horse. My son was born in the year of the pig. And his partner was born in the year of the dog. We have the horse, the pig, the dog stroke wolf, and the dragon. Strange. Yeah.